first up, we actually do have some Dungeons and the Dragons to discuss.
But the dragon might not be in the dungeon.
The dragon might be in here.
In your heart?
In my heart.
That's for the people watching at home.
Yes. I just thought it might make them want to watch the video too. But it's fine. You can... Anyway, I am putting a hand over my heart to say that the dragon might have been inside of us the whole time.
Sounds like a polymorph self-spell.
Yeah. You know what? That actually will probably become relevant in a minute too. But we're going to be doing a crit think because Alex, you and I have been actually playing D&D in real life.
We have been.
We have been. You have been running a game for your son and for our illustrious graphic design person.
Our brand director.
Our brand director, yes.
As we call her.
Who does all of the things you see, basically. Teaching them the system.
Yes, because they're new.
Mm-hmm.
They've never played before. This is their first D&D game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I picked up I think I mentioned before, I picked up the D&D Essentials kit, not the starter. It's not the pre-generated characters, they can make their own characters, and here's a, adventure to get you up to, level 9, maybe?
9,
something like that.
Okay, yeah. Well,
maybe
that makes
6.
sense. I think you said that there were, 9 adventures or something.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Anyways.
Not really important, but...
Yeah.
But, yeah, basically, starter adventure pack, so that you can kind of get used to the mechanics. Do they start you out at level 1?
Yeah. You joined us little ways in. They've already done several quests.
Good.
So I think your character's level 2?
3.
3? You're 3.
I'm 3.
Yeah. The first 3 quests they did got them a level.
Okay.
Or the first, 2 of the quests, because they're level 3 and they start at level 1. So.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So that makes sense. Good. And what is the module called?
Icespire Peak.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I know that there was a dragon on the cover.
Yeah, it's a cryovane.
It's a cryovane, and
that's
means...
the dragon's name.
Cryovane. And cryovane breathes ice.
He's a white dragon.
Yes.
Yes.
That's good.
Anyways, we've been playing this. I have not DM'd in several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have also never run a module that someone else written before.
Yes. So, the first question... Well, I think we actually have a couple things.
We have a few things to talk about.
A few things to talk about in that. We have one kind of character development stuff that I wanted to discuss, but also, before we get into that, I'm curious about how the modules work for you, as opposed to you used to homebrew a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
so how's that change?
It's a bit different. If I were to be prepping a bit more, I think it would not be quite as different, because I could just do some work and try and figure things out on my own too, to add to it, but I'm trying to just kind of do with what's written. So it's a little different than brewing my own campaign, because one of the things I have an issue with is NPCs. They've got kind of a small blurb occasionally about what the character might be like, or what they look like, but it doesn't really tell me anything or give me any other information they might know, or their personality, for instance. So it's hard for me to roleplay out an NPC if I'm not familiar with them at all. It's like, okay, well, what do I want to make them aside from a standard NPC that's kind of like, oh, okay, sure. The kings in that you guys just did, I kind of was like, well, this guy's supposed to be a little bit crazy, so let's make him sound a little nuts.
Sure.
Little paranoid, if you will.
Yeah.
But other NPCs, I'm just like, I have no idea what to do for this NPC.
Yeah,
you know?
I could tell that you were having a little bit of an issue just because when you get into the book, they kind of tell you the names of the characters, but
And that's it.
not really even like a script of the dialogue or anything, just kind of like, the general idea of what's going on.
There's a couple pieces there where it'll be like, oh yeah, if you guys had gone up to the door and knocked on the king's chamber,
Mm.
he would talk to you through the door and be like, yeah, I
Oh,
won't come
gotcha.
out unless you kill the shape changer.
Oh, gotcha.
Spoilers. Um, but there's a few things like that. Like the town master, if you go to he'll only talk through a door too, and he'll slip the gold pieces underneath the door one by one,
Okay.
to give you your payments for the quest. And it gives a little bit like that, but there's not a whole lot to flesh it
Fair
out.
enough.
Which I guess is fine. You don't want to take people that are really new and give them too much,
Sure.
you know?
Sure.
But other times, I'm looking through this and the rooms in the dungeons and in the places you're at don't have a lot of description to them,
Okay.
which again is fine for a lot of cases. It's like, yeah, it's a nondescript room in a cave.
Yeah.
But like, if you're not gonna have something interesting in the room, or at least visually interesting in a room, I think it's a little bit of a waste to be like, yeah, there's a room.
Enjoy.
There's nothing in the room. Okay, well, why is this a separate like entry in here then? Why is it not just a hallway?
Right. I had all these rooms I populated with nothing.
Yeah, it's a
Enjoy.
little bit weird. It's like
Mm-hmm.
someone would be like, yeah, there's a dresser and nothing to make it, I guess, look like it was lived in.
Sure.
But I think in the case that you do that, you could be like, it's got like a dresser and maybe a shelf and like have a little blurb that's like, it looks like a bedroom that is disused and has been long abandoned type thing. Give a
Sure.
little blurb. That way you can just be like, okay, well, this is kind of just a set piece.
Yeah.
Gives you a feeling, but doesn't give you anything to work with. Like,
Right.
if you search the drawers, maybe you find like a couple scraps of paper
Sure.
that are just nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to make players think that the room is important when it's not.
Right.
But
Right.
you also don't want them to be like, well, this is stupid.
No. No. Preferably no. You might have noticed, like, maybe just because I've done this a few times, I would ask a lot of times, like, is there a door? Should I check the door? Can I
Yeah.
check for traps? Because I kept thinking to myself, in starter adventures, if you're trying to get people used to the system, you might want to give them the heads up pretty early on. Things might be trapped.
Well, at the same time, you don't want to also, like, you don't want to give new players the expectation that every room is
Everything
trapped.
is trapped. Yeah.
So generally in that case where it was like, no, I was kind of going, no, I'll let you know if I need you to make a check for anything, like specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll ask if there's something you want to do in the room, like, did you want to search the room or whatever that. I'll kind of prompt that.
Sure.
Because then it's not like, you enter a room, cool, I search it, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, there's nothing here. You can take a few minutes if you want, but there's absolutely nothing in this room.
Sure.
Like, I don't want you guys wasting your time
Mm.
searching a room that is actually empty.
Yeah. It's kind of it just totally bogs down and just stops the game entirely.
Yeah, it's not even like your characters would probably do it, but you can just kind of be like, hey, can we search a room? Be like, okay, yeah. You guys, I'm like, don't roll for it. You search a room, you take 20 minutes, you kind of do a quick thing, and there's nothing.
Mhm.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you don't want the players wasting their in-game time or their, like, the session time doing
Right.
something that's useless.
Right. Right.
That's why it's if there's I think the general rule is if there's not a chance of failure or success,
Sure.
then don't roll for it.
Right.
So, like, if there's not an outcome that's based on chance, don't roll.
Okay, yeah, I understand. To actually pose the question for you is, do you think that there are things that were beneficial to you having had experience with the game and having run games before that you were able to utilize even though it's a pre-made module?
Probably. I can bend the rules a little bit where I see fit, like, if I want to be able to give you items that aren't in the module for any instance, or if I want to modify things that are in there slightly, I can do that. Like, when you guys were killing the mimic, and my son actually murdered it on his turn, but I was like, all right, well, it's Nathan's turn next, and I want to see what he does.
Right.
So you did that, and you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna stab it because it doesn't want to do anything with my spells, and you know, went up and you stabbed it with your rapier, and you went basically into its mouth, and then it just kind of like died around you with it in its mouth.
Disgusting. I love it.
Disgusting, but it was kind of like I wanted to do that as like a set piece, and I wasn't sure what you were gonna do, but it's like,
yeah,
I didn't want to, because my son had the tendril attached to his chest because he had gotten the adhesive to it, and he cut the tendril, and I was like, well, it's kind of a lame way to like kill it,
right?
You know, that's not a very like, if he had just stabbed it outright, I'd be like, yeah, you stab it, and
Would it be amazing if I had just tried Vicious Mockery one more time?
And then it just died.
And it got insulted, and just like, fine, I'm dead now.
Right, and we're like, it would have been like, oh no, my heart. I would have had a talk that one time.
Yeah, probably not, because like I failed the first 2 times I tried Vicious Mockery.
Yeah, you definitely made those saves.
Yeah.
But like at the same point too, where, you know, I had forgotten kind of the stuff about the mimic, and I had to go back through it, where you guys had gone through that part of the dungeon the first time, where the mimic was in the room with you.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you're like, I had specifically asked you, because you were looking at the barrels, and the other players, like, if they wanted to check them out, which ones they wanted to check out, and whatnot. And you had only gone over to the ones in the corner, and not the ones on the wall. Right. And then when you went through, you looked, but the mimic wasn't there. Actually, you should have probably noticed that there was a barrel missing. Now that I think of it, I didn't think of it then, but... Right. You know, I had the mimic basically taking the form of a chest in a room that didn't have a chest in it before, but you guys didn't really pay attention to that room aside from what was going on with the ballista.
I was more interested in the, that room, and then when it got to the wine, I was more interested in the wine part.
Yeah, so you weren't, like, taking... If you had, like, gone through and, like, if you guys had... Nice. If you guys... She got a cat in her lap.
Perfect.
Perched. Anyways, if you guys had like moved the barrels around or investigated them a lot more closely, or like touched them, you know, it would have been different. Because if you had touched the mimic, you would have stuck to it. Which is why when Ray's character touched it, her hand was suddenly stuck to it. Because she went to open it, and it's like, oh, and now surprise, it bites you.
Right. Now, to be fair, that was not for lack of trying to discover that it was indeed a mimic, because I do remember that our friendly neighborhood rogue, your son, did try to shoot an arrow at it, and it didn't do anything. And I did try Vicious Mockery on it to see if I could damage it at all, and that didn't happen. So we did take a couple precautions before we approached it.
So the funny part is, you know, if I wanted to extend it a little bit, I probably would have swapped it right then and there and made it somewhere else in the dungeon.
Sure.
Because if he had done that and you had done that, and I was like, well, they think it's a mimic, and it is a mimic, that's one thing. But if they think it's the mimic and it's really just a chest, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, we're going to shoot it. Oh, I'm going to insult it with a spell. Oh, I'm going to open it. Oh, it's actually just a chest full of clothing. All right, well, that was dumb. We feel stupid now.
Until it turns out the mimic was one of the pieces of clothing.
Until the mimic turns out to be the clothing in the chest, yeah.
The mimic is the clothing in the chest.
That would have been great.
Yeah. You put the chest, you put the shirt on.
You put the shirt on. It's you. Jeez. So one of the things too with that, as well, as you noticed, was you were kind of mapping that dungeon.
Trying to.
Which again would have worked with draft paper, but I found it a lot easier later to just have the map printed out, because I'm like, all right, you guys have pretty much seen this entire dungeon. Here's like the map, print it out in front of you so you can backtrack and have it there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to look at. I think that was a lot easier because then you don't have to be like, all right, we want to go back. I'm like, I don't have to ask you which direction. I can be like, do you want to go here or to here? That is so much, I think, more convenient
Sure.
because then it's like, all right, I don't have to like describe the corner as much for you. And I think for
Right.
new players, that's probably a bit more helpful, especially if you don't have like specific descriptions in there.
Mm.
You know,
Oh yeah.
so that's one of those things too where I think going forward, if I make a campaign and it has a dungeon, I'm going to like make a map for it or
Got
have
it.
a map for it of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And those are definitely all things that I've noticed while doing it that I can take forward if I make another campaign and be like, all right, well, these are some things that I learned from reading a module and playing a module and running it, to kind of that I would like to improve on.
Sure. That makes sense. The other question that I had when I actually did see the map is, and I don't want to slight the people that made the module, but um, how do they design these things? Like Gnomengard is like I don't know why the gnomes would have built this that way. It
Oh no, we
seems
we had
very
a whole discussion about dungeon design before.
yeah. How did we get lost in this dungeon? I think I understand now because I was very confused as to the design decisions
think
they
I
had
think that's a
made.
cave system. So like if you're going with natural cave systems, then you're kind of
Yeah,
just expanding rooms that already exist, but not really changing the architecture of the inside.
yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, when you actually looked at the map of the Gnomengard, it kind of reminded me a little bit of like an ant colony. The way that
Yeah,
it was like expanded out to certain chambers that just had like it had like little rows that go over to another one, and maybe that's what they were thinking is that they're just trying to tunnel in and excavate
yeah.
areas as it
But
was.
like in man-made dungeons
Mm-hmm.
type things, and we've talked about this again, it feels a little different. I think
Yeah.
caverns and caves are different than dungeons and structures.
Yeah, I can understand a cave would be like a natural formation, so it wouldn't
I always
necessarily.
that brings me back to like Diablo 2, where
Oh
you
yeah,
go into the monastery and it's like these long hallways with nothing around them, and
yeah.
then goes all over the place, and you're like, who would build this like this?
No, they wouldn't.
No,
No,
you would not. Diablo 3 did a lot better job with the dungeons being
sure.
compacted and
Mhm.
like actually a structure.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's one of those things that we've talked about. And if you want to go back into our archives, if you haven't listened to that, we did a whole segment about dungeon design and who the hell built these.
yeah. I think that was also a crit thing. So
Probably.
if you're looking at this playlist, chances are it's in there from one of the early ones. So that's good. Glad that you've been able to kind of like work your way around a pre-made module because I know that that's kind of a new thing for you.
Yeah. Again, it's definitely showing me things that are helpful
Mhm.
and things that I would do differently if I were to write my own to
Sure.
make it a little bit more accessible and easier to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So now player aspect. Talk a little bit about that. So I wanted to create a character. I'll tell people a little bit about what I'm doing for Max. When you asked if I wanted to maybe come in and talk a little bit, add a little bit maybe to character design or development, just like build out the characters a little bit more.
Yeah, so I asked you if you want to play because I figured it would be helpful to have another person that knows the game a bit better
Mm-hmm.
and somebody that would be better at the roleplay aspect and the in-character stuff because you've done
Sure.
that a lot more
Mm-hmm.
to help them kind of be more comfortable trying to play in character and do
Sure.
those role-playing aspects as well.
Yeah. So
Plus,
yeah.
then you get into game and I have another player. So.
that is helpful. Yeah, you originally planned on having some other players, but that didn't seem to pan out. So
Yeah, and then my character is
Possible.
just kind of to fill the party out a bit, to have another character that can help with tasks and things.
right.
Just kind of to balance it out, but he's not much for talking.
No, he's a very silent ranger.
Any characters to make as a DM that are there to help the party, kind of the strong silent type.
Yeah, fair enough. It is a little bit tricky when you're trying to just rely on like one or two characters to be the party, because you don't have a lot of like movement that you can do if you get it. If one person gets like, if you only had the two players, it was just the two of them. You have your rogue and your fighter, and they got into that mimic fight, and one of them has their hand now on attached to the thing. Your options are a little limited.
Yeah.
Even if the mimic had less hit points and was, it would still be very limiting. So the question that I had to ask myself, because we did want to really teach them the game and kind of get them acclimated to it more than anything, is, okay, so what am I going to play? Because we have a rogue and we have a fighter, and then you were going to play a ranger. And then I had to think to myself, well, if it was just me building a character, I'd probably end up making another damn monk. but realistically, that's not going to be very, good for the party that you're building, because I'm just going to go up and hit everything a million times.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what I'm going to do, because I like doing that. And I played melee characters in the past, and I thought, well, if we're doing a challenge for me, I'm not really schooled on spellcasters in general. And if I'm going to take something that's built for support, I think I'm probably going to go with a bard. And I'm going to do College of Lore. So that was pretty much what I built. And then when I tried to think about what I would do for a character, my basic thought was it would be kind of fun if I was like an aging rock star, and I was a little rock gnome that has had a lot of hits back in the day and hasn't aged very well, but he's just playing these taverns to like crowds of no one, and that would be a fun thing for me to do, and I can also get used to the actual spell casting part, because bards do have some that are helpful, and a lot of support skills.
Right, bards are jack of all trades, master of meh.
Yeah, you could probably, you can build a lot of character classes out in a lot of different ways, but bards do have a lot of options that are for benefiting and buffing parties.
Yeah.
So I thought that I would actually try to focus on that. Some healing, some like inspiration, bravery, and stuff like that. But when I was in the process of that, and I was kind of hearing them talk about some of the backstory that they gave characters, I realized, besides the whole thing where he's been a bard for a really long time, I didn't really know what the backstory kind of like was. And I realized I had kind of painted myself into a corner. So I think I figured out a way to get myself out of that corner. So I want to brainstorm with you here, because I like this idea, but I want to know what you have to think. So as player to GM, this is what I'm thinking. So this was the conundrum I had for my character. I'm a bard that's been a bard, like a professional bard, for 300 years. Okay? That's like my profession. And I still have my starting equipment, and I can't cast better than second level spells.
Okay, well, I think there's a difference between a musician and a bard.
Okay. But I'm kind of going with the idea that he's been like a bard. Like he's really been a bard. Like, to be the rock star, he had to like still do adventures so that he had material. So
you're thinking he's done 300 years of failed checks.
300 years of failed checks. I had a more interesting idea, though. I had a really interesting idea for what would be going on. So, what if it were like a Dread Pirate Roberts situation?
Oh no.
Where it turns out that the Max Jaguar you're meeting is like the 12th iteration of the original Max Jaguar. And what happens is, the original Max Jaguar, who was a rock gnome bard, just like who looked exactly the way the current one does.
So he's just passing it down his family line.
Like basic. Well, not even his family line, but
I think it'd be funnier
yeah.
if it was his family line and you just
really?
happen to be like Max Jaguar, the 23rd.
The 23rd.
Yeah.
Here's what I was thinking of originally, is that you have Max, who was a rock gnome bard, and he did College of Lore, and he specifically played the Yarding and the Zulkun, which are the instruments that I have with me. And he got tired of doing the rock star life at a certain point, even though he was at the height of his career. And so he said to himself, well, I've gotten to such a level that I can actually do like a polymorph, almost like a ritual to like pass his visage and his entire, like, who he is and pass it on to somebody. And so took on an apprentice. And I kind of had the idea that the apprentice doesn't even need to be a gnome. Doesn't really need to be any particular thing, because they're going to inherit it all, basically, from the last one, so that you can retire. And because of that, so the apprentice comes in, they perform like this ceremony, essentially, where you polymorph into Max, and then when you get to be to a level where you can actually pass it on, you could revert back to who you were, and the next one to take it up can actually take on the lineage of Max.
So it's actually like just the music instruments that are passed down, and his essence goes with them.
Yeah.
It's okay. So I figured it out for you, Nathan.
Okay.
How about
Hmm.
the person that is actually the Max Jaguar isn't like the PC,
Okay.
but the set of equipment is like intelligent.
Oh.
And like takes control of the humanoid.
Oh, okay.
So your character isn't really important, but like the music instruments are basically possessing the character.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they just kind of get passed whenever they find someone else more suitable, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna pass ourselves to this guy.
Oh, okay. That would be interesting, actually, because that would make sense. Because I started to think to myself, well, that would actually be really useful, because it makes sense why he doesn't seem like he's very good at anything, because he's probably only actually been in this form for like a couple years, maybe, and just going around playing these different, I kind of figured that it would always be a bard, but besides that, there were no criteria for who it might pick.
So, the previous iteration of Max was dying somehow.
Sure.
And this was the only person that the intelligent items could inherit.
Yeah.
Or to possess.
Yeah.
So they went from like having a skilled musician who could use them properly, and like somebody that like actually had the dexterity and like the capabilities, to just this shitty rock gnome. Right.
I was thinking, though, I don't know if he was even a rock gnome to start with.
Oh, no, he probably didn't have to be. It's probably just been passed down like folklore.
Yeah, exactly. And so I keep thinking to myself, I think I technically have 2 instruments, like I was mentioning, but I'm proficient in 3. And so the other thing that I'm actually proficient in is a war gong.
A war gong.
A war gong.
Ooh. So, what you're thinking is...
That's what he used to play before this whole thing happened.
So, I was thinking later on you find the war gong of Max Jaguar.
Oh, yeah.
And then, suddenly your bardic ability becomes greater.
Yeah. If I find the actual war gong, like that was lost 3 iterations ago or something like that. Yeah, that would be interesting.
And it's like, oh, it's the lost war gong of Max Jaguar.
Oh, yeah.
And it, like, suddenly, like, you get an additional bardic inspiration dice and proficiency or something like that. It's like, cool. I'm complete. The set is back together.
The set has been completed.
The band is back together.
The band is back together. Congratulations.
It's like, oh, you're so shitty because you're missing your third piece. You're missing part of your soul.
Maybe the real heavy like thunder magic that he has, or like the earth magic that he doesn't use right now, was the gong. was
There
the
you go.
war drum, because you have to
There you
beat on it. Because I did kind of imagine, I think this is kind of how bards are supposed to work, is that the musical instruments are sort of where the magic kind of comes.
It can be the
from.
focus. I mean, bards can use their voice as a performance piece
sure.
too. Like, you don't have to use an instrument. You can be like, yeah, I sing.
Yeah, I kind of figured, like, for different things, like, if you're using inspiration, or you're using vicious mockery or anything like that, it's probably you talking. But when it came to, like, thunder spells, I figured that's almost like him taking the little portable organ and just, like, doing a riff on the thing and then just hitting all the buttons at once, and it blasts out the thunder magic to them.
It'd be great the vocal with an instrumental vicious mockery that is just boom, just a rim shot.
Maybe when he gets the war drum, I don't know. But then I thought, like, things like sleep are probably when he gets the guitar and he does, like, a soothing lull. Yeah, and that lulls them into the false sense of security, I guess. But maybe I can actually, if I ever find the war drum and I gain some levels, I'll
just transform you into a half elf at that point.
Oh, perfectly. Well, I kind of had an idea that maybe before this whole thing happened, maybe he was like a wood elf, and that's, like, they came across him, and when he was, like, in the forest or something like that, and he was just, like, playing around on some drums, or he was, like, just hitting some sticks up against a thing, and they were like, "You'll do." And just transform
it's a shame that this isn't like my own campaign now, because I could take these thoughts and just, like, oh, I'm writing this in. So I have a question for anyone listening. If you have ever run a module or have thought about writing it or have played in one, are there things that you find you take away from it that you would do differently or would like to improve upon, or maybe ways that you change it to suit your needs better as a DM or as a player?
Yeah. How would you personally improve a module, basically? Yeah, we can take that. We will leave that up to everyone listening, and feel free to catch us in Discord or over on socials if you would like to, or you can even email us, fine, if you have any thoughts on that, or leave a voice clip.
knockdown@gmail.com.
Yeah.
To leave a voice clip, you actually have to make an account with Anchor. I found that out from Datum.
Oh, interesting to know. If you do use Anchor, though, for your podcasting, you can do it over there. So
yeah. So if you also want to send a voice clip and do it via email or Google Drive and give us that as well, we can do that as well. Because yeah, Datum had tried to send us a voice clip before and it did not send because he didn't have an account with it at the time. So yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.